The Galactic Empire stretched across the void like a monument to arrogance, a civilization so ancient it had forgotten what struggle felt like. Every planet bowed, every species obeyed, and peace, manufactured, polished, enforced, had become the only truth they knew. For thousands of years, their fleets ruled the stars unopposed, their admirals worshipped like gods. War had become a myth studied in archives, something primitive and unthinkable. Their society ran on predictability and fear disguised as order. In the core halls of the Empire, power meant stability. Every admiral believed the universe had already been tamed. The thought of rebellion or defiance was absurd. Yet even among this galaxy-spanning complacency, distant whispers arrived from the outer spiral arms, reports of a new species. A small, isolated civilization that had suddenly leapt into faster-than-light travel, breaching what was long declared imperial territory. They called themselves humans. The Council dismissed it as irrelevant. Civilizations emerged all the time, most collapsing before contact. But these reports carried strange inconsistencies. Unlike other young races that reached space timidly, this one built warships. Not ceremonial defense vessels or exploration crafts, true war machines. Their designs were brutal, metal plating thick enough to shrug off debris, redundant engines, vast missile bays. To the Empire's scholars, it looked almost barbaric, a species obsessed with conflict even before joining the stars. Their diplomats labeled it cultural insanity. Their admirals found it amusing. The Emperor's Council authorized a standard contact procedure. A fleet of 20 ships, each capable of reducing a continent to ash, was dispatched to escort the humans into compliance. The Empire always used the word escort for subjugation. It sounded civil, respectable, clean. The fleet commander, Grand Admiral Turnith, viewed the mission as routine. He'd done this 100 times. Lesser civilizations either submitted immediately or were vaporized before they realized the scale of power arrayed against them. This would be no different. When first contact occurred, the Empire's transmission was direct and absolute. You have entered Imperial jurisdiction. Power down your weapons and surrender your vessels for inspection. It was the same phrase used for centuries, spoken with cold authority that brooked no debate. On the bridge, the alien officers waited for the usual panic, frantic communications, attempts to appease, the begging that always followed. But instead, silence filled the comms. No acknowledgments. No cries. No threats. Just silence. Then, the translators detected something strange, a sound, faint but unmistakable. Laughter. It wasn't nervous or mocking, it was pure, uncontrolled amusement. It echoed through the comms like static wrapped in madness. For the admirals who had never known fear, it was confusing. For those old enough to remember the distant age of rebellion, it was something else entirely, unsettling. The human response was short and untranslatable in tone, but one word stood out. Inspection? Followed again by laughter. The Empire, for all its dominance, didn't understand the meaning behind it. They saw it as disrespect, a primitive's defiance that would soon be crushed. Yet something in that sound struck deeper than arrogance could dismiss. The humans didn't laugh out of ignorance. They laughed because the Empire believed power alone ruled the stars. A few officers exchanged wary glances as the human fleet's readings came into sharper resolution. Their ships were smaller, slower, less efficient, but every single one was armed. Every ton of their hull was built for war. Even their science vessels carried weapons capable of piercing armor. It wasn't aggression, it was preparedness born from fear turned into habit. The Admiral, unimpressed, ordered targeting locks. Imperial protocol demanded immediate submission. Still, the humans didn't move. Their transmissions cut off, replaced by a faint pulse, one the Empire's AI interpreted as an open-channel feed. What it revealed was bizarre. The human crews were visible, calm, laughing, moving casually inside their ships as if they were in a bar, not facing the greatest military power in the galaxy. To the Empire, it looked insane. To humanity, it was instinct. They had seen the worst their own kind could inflict and survived. No empire terrified them. No authority commanded them. They had lived too long in chaos to fear structure. For the first time in centuries, the empire encountered something that didn't kneel, didn't plead, and didn't even bother to posture. Humanity didn't take the empire seriously, and that was the most terrifying revelation of all. The empire believed the universe obeyed strength. The humans believed strength was irrelevant if you couldn't endure madness. As the fleet commander stared at the monitor, watching these strange beings laugh at a threat that once silenced worlds, he felt something he couldn't name, a sensation so alien it chilled him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was the awareness that something fundamental had changed. The age of the Empire's dominance had ended the moment the humans laughed. The laughter echoed across encrypted channels, recorded by thousands of sensors, analyzed by machines that couldn't find logic in it. The Empire had faced silence, fear, and obedience before, but never humor. To beings who had built their identity on reverence, mockery felt alien, incomprehensible. Admirals reviewed the sound repeatedly, as though deciphering a weapon cloaked in noise. What unnerved them most wasn't defiance. It was the ease in that laughter, the relaxed tone of a species utterly unbothered by the power facing them. The fleet held position, engines humming under disciplined silence. Imperial cruisers surrounded the human vessels, luminous arcs forming a wall of certainty. Yet every sensor sweep returned the same result: no sign of surrender, no weapons powered down, no fear detected. Humans moved normally aboard their ships, monitoring systems, chatting, drinking coffee. It was an ordinary day for them, except they were surrounded by the deadliest navy in the galaxy. Confusion seeped through the command chain. In the Empire, behavior had rules. Every known race recognized Imperial superiority and responded predictably: panic, submission, or desperate negotiation. Humanity did none of those things. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't bravery. It was amusement. A civilization laughing in the face of an empire that had forgotten what resistance looked like. The commanding admiral sent a final transmission, voice sharpened by irritation: "Submit your fleet, or be destroyed." He expected fear, begging, or at least acknowledgement. What came instead was a calm voice, precise and emotionless, carried through static. "You have no idea what's behind us." Then silence again. No threats, no posturing. Just a statement delivered with absolute confidence. Moments later, Imperial long-range sensors registered new signatures, hundreds of them. Warp readings filled the tactical displays like a flood. Human vessels of every configuration dropped out of faster-than-light travel, forming a formation that looked chaotic yet deliberate. Frigates, carriers, dreadnoughts, each scarred, repaired, and armed. None carried the sleek perfection of Imperial engineering. They were rough, patchwork, and functional. Yet every ship bore signs of experience. These were not explorers. These were veterans. The sudden appearance shattered the Empire's assumptions. No primitive race could field a fleet of this size so soon after discovery. Some officers whispered about pre-contact errors, impossible industrial data, timelines that didn't align. Others theorized that humans had reverse-engineered stolen technology. But the simplest explanation, the one they didn't want to admit, was that humanity had built this with their own hands, under pressure, through necessity. A data officer played back intercepted human communications. No command codes, no chance of loyalty, just casual exchanges, jokes, strategy chatter, laughter. The Empire operated through hierarchy and fear. The humans operated through familiarity and chaos. That chaos was their structure. As Imperial ships recalibrated targeting arrays, analysts compared their armaments. Human weapons were crude: ray guns, missiles, coil-driven mass projectors. Ancient tools by Imperial standards, yet every test simulation predicted catastrophic damage if those weapons hit. The Empire's shielding technology had evolved for plasma and energy attacks, not hypervelocity metals. It wasn't elegance that made humanity dangerous. It was their obsession with efficiency, their instinct to turn old tools into nightmares. The Council fleet hesitated. Something primal stirred beneath centuries of order. The Empire's officers began to realize the imbalance wasn't technological, it was psychological. Humanity carried itself like predators who had learned to live with their own kind. Empires waged war for power, humans waged war for survival, and that made them unpredictable. The admiral, unwilling to show hesitation, gave the order to engage targeting locks. His hands trembled slightly, hidden beneath command robes. As he stared at the tactical feed, the human ships adjusted formation, spreading out loosely, not defensive, not offensive, simply ready. No movement wasted. No transmission sent. Their silence was louder than any threat. In that void, the Empire's certainty began to crumble. For the first time in generations, officers questioned their supremacy. The Empire ruled through intimidation, but intimidation failed against those who laughed at extinction. Humanity's silence became a statement, a reminder that fear only works on those who've known peace. These people hadn't. They were forged in conflict, raised on history written in blood and recovery. The Admiral's aides requested retreat authorization, citing tactical anomalies. He refused, clinging to doctrine like a drowning man. Yet the damage was already done. Across every bridge, across every ship, one realization spread: the humans weren't insane. They were prepared. And the Empire, for all its pride, had no idea what that meant. When the human commander finally spoke again, his words were brief, clear, and almost casual. "You wanted submission. You'll find it difficult to get any from us." The channel cut. No threats followed. No taunts. Just the quiet certainty of a species that didn't need to prove itself. The Empire had built its power on obedience and control. Humanity had built theirs on chaos and endurance. And as the fleet drifted in tense silence, every Imperial officer understood a truth they'd never admit aloud: this was no first contact. This was the beginning of their first real fear. The Empire's first volley lit up the void, plasma lances searing through darkness, a display meant to intimidate, not annihilate. The humans didn't retreat. They didn't even dodge. A single destroyer took the hit, shields flaring before vanishing in silence. Instead of panic, it retaliated instantly, unleashing a barrage of kinetic projectiles that tore through the nearest Imperial cruiser like paper. The Empire's command channel filled with confusion as telemetry spiked. The physics didn't make sense. The humans were using simple metal slugs propelled at obscene velocities, weapons so ancient they'd been museum pieces in Imperial culture. Yet the impact shredded shielding systems and hull plating effortlessly. Within seconds, the void erupted into chaos. The Imperial fleet, drilled into perfection, moved by protocol. The humans, on the other hand, moved like a storm, unpredictable, unscripted, fluid. Their ships broke formation, crossing firing lanes, acting without orders yet perfectly coordinated. It wasn't disorder. It was instinct, born of countless battles fought without certainty of survival. Their AIs predicted Imperial maneuvers in real time, countering patterns before they were even completed. Every human missile found a weakness the Empire didn't know it had. When Imperial cruisers tried to adapt, switching to particle lances, humans switched frequencies, throwing sensor ghosts into the network. Their ships appeared and vanished across scanners, signatures distorted by intentional chaos. What looked like reckless aggression was a web of calculated unpredictability. The Empire's command AI, built for predictable wars, couldn't compute. Orders overlapped, targeting failed, and within minutes, the fleet's formation collapsed. Human weaponry looked primitive but operated on brutal logic. Where the Empire valued precision, humans valued destruction. If a missile missed, it exploded into clouds of shrapnel, turning empty space into lethal debris. Imperial ships, designed for clean engagements, couldn't maneuver through that. Their shields overloaded, engines faltered, and communications disintegrated under waves of electromagnetic interference. The humans were not fighting to prove dominance. They were fighting like survivors who understood that hesitation kills. Admiral Turneth watched his tactical board burn red. Every simulation, every training doctrine, every lesson of Imperial superiority failed at once. The humans didn't fight with honor or restraint, they fought with purpose stripped of vanity. Their ships rammed damaged targets, detonating reactors intentionally to cripple enemy lines. No Empire vessel had ever witnessed such disregard for self-preservation. It wasn't desperation. It was strategy. Each loss was an equation for maximum impact. The Empire's capital ship tried to regain control, broadcasting commands to regroup, but human hackers had already infiltrated their communication relays. Ghost signals mimicked Imperial authority, sending false orders, splitting the fleet. Entire squadrons fired on friendly units before realizing the deception. By the time order was restored, it was too late. Out of 20 Imperial ships, fewer than half remained operational. And then, as suddenly as it began, the humans stopped firing. Their weapons went cold. The surviving Imperial vessels, battered and burning, drifted aimlessly in the silence. No final strike came. The humans simply ceased engagement, as if the battle had served its purpose. A message blinked across every surviving Imperial console, short, clear, and merciless. That was restraint. The meaning struck harder than any weapon. The Empire, accustomed to total control, had just been spared deliberately. No enemy had ever done that. It wasn't mercy, it was demonstration. Humanity had proven dominance not by extermination, but by choice. They could end it at will, and the Empire now understood that truth better than any broadcast could explain. Admiral Turnus stared at the remains of his fleet, his pride dissolving into disbelief. The humans hadn't fought like a new species. They'd fought like a civilization that had survived extinction countless times and learned from every scar. Their ships didn't represent technology. They represented willpower refined into weaponry. As emergency signals pulsed and damaged ships limped away, every Imperial officer carried the same realization: the galaxy's balance had shifted. The humans didn't conquer, they warned. Their silence after victory was more terrifying than their laughter before it. The Empire, undefeated for millennia, had just faced a species that considered this massacre a lesson, not a war. And the most chilling part was knowing that they hadn't even fought seriously. The council chambers, once a place of arrogance and ceremony, now trembled beneath the weight of disbelief. Reports of the defeat were delivered in quiet tones, every word a blade cutting through centuries of confidence. The greatest military power in history had been humiliated in open space, not by a rival empire or rebellion, but by a species that had entered the galactic stage less than a generation ago. The loss wasn't just military, it was existential. Everything the Empire believed about hierarchy, control, and inevitability had been proven wrong in a single encounter. Within hours, the political machine went into damage control. Official statements rebranded the battle as a containment operation, insisting the loss was strategic. The word defeat was banned from all channels. Admirals who spoke truth were quietly reassigned or silenced. The propaganda networks spun a new narrative: that the humans had used trickery, that their weapons were unstable, that the Empire allowed the retreat to prevent collateral damage. Lies layered upon lies, but even the most loyal citizens sensed a tremor beneath the surface. The Empire had been touched by something it couldn't understand. In the hidden circles of government, panic spread like a virus. Military analysts dissected the engagement in silence, studying every frame, every maneuver. The findings were worse than expected. The humans weren't stronger. They weren't more advanced. They were simply unafraid. Every simulation ran by the Council's strategic AI predicted the same outcome. When facing an enemy that didn't fear death, the Empire's doctrine collapsed. Fear had been the foundation of their rule, and humanity had rendered it meaningless. Whispers reached the civilian worlds, stories of human ships tearing through Imperial lines, of laughter heard on the comms before destruction fell. The Empire censored every account, but truth spread faster than bureaucracy could contain it. Some alien races began to question their loyalty. Others secretly cheered. To the oppressed, humanity was a myth reborn, a reminder that no empire lasts forever. To the powerful, they were a nightmare that could not be reasoned with. Meetings stretched for days as the High Council debated how to respond. Half demanded retribution, the other half demanded restraint. The military wanted war, the scholars wanted understanding. A few dared to ask the question none wanted to answer: what if the humans weren't done? Their fleets had vanished beyond imperial space, leaving no trace. Yet every probe sent to monitor them returned incomplete, or didn't return at all. It was as if the humans allowed themselves to be seen only when they chose. Intelligence agencies gathered fragments of intercepted human data. It painted an unsettling picture: industrial networks working at impossible speed, shipyards expanding across multiple systems, training exercises recorded daily. Humanity wasn't rebuilding. They were evolving. The Empire's analysts realized they were witnessing a species that treated war not as a burden, but as routine. Their strength came not from technology, but from adaptation. For every defeat in their history, they had grown sharper. For every tragedy, they had found purpose. The Council tried to rationalize this behavior. It's cultural madness, one senator argued. A species addicted to conflict will eventually destroy itself. Yet the data suggested the opposite. Human civilization had unified through chaos. They had learned to survive their own brutality, and emerged stronger each time. They had domesticated conflict. It wasn't destruction to them, it was refinement. Diplomatic factions proposed contacting them again, seeking negotiation. The proposal died instantly. No one could forget the tone of that laughter or the message that followed the battle. That was restraint. To the Empire, it sounded less like a warning and more like a prophecy. If that was restraint, what would their fury look like? Across the galaxy, species began shifting allegiance quietly. The myth of imperial invincibility had cracked, and through that fracture spread hope and fear in equal measure. The Empire, for the first time in millennia, found itself reacting instead of commanding. Their fleets were recalled, their borders fortified. Yet no one knew what they were preparing for: a counterattack, or another lesson. Because somewhere beyond their reach, humanity moved unseen, unpredictable, and silent. And silence, the Council realized too late, was not peace. It was patience. Months after the battle, the Empire's envoys arrived at the edge of human space, their ships stripped of weapons, their transmissions humble for the first time in recorded memory. They came not as conquerors, but as students seeking to understand what they had encountered. Across the galaxy, the event was watched in silence. The Empire, a civilization that once demanded obedience from all, now reached out to those who had laughed in its face. Humanity received them without hostility, without triumph, only with the same calm certainty that had unsettled the galaxy since their arrival. The lead envoy asked the question that haunted every world: why did you laugh? It wasn't mockery, it was desperation disguised as curiosity. The human representative regarded him with quiet empathy, as if speaking to a child who had just realized the universe was larger than his imagination. The answer came without arrogance, without aggression. Because we've seen this story before, the human said. Empires rise believing they've tamed chaos, forgetting that chaos is where we were born. The envoy pressed further, insisting that no species could view war as anything but tragedy. The humans smiled faintly. War is tragedy, they said. But it's also truth. It strips away illusion. We didn't build fleets to conquer. We built them because every generation before us tried peace and found it fragile. We learned to survive what others couldn't imagine. The words carried no threat, yet the envoy felt the weight of civilizations collapsing beneath them. When asked what humanity sought, the human answer was disarmingly simple. Not your worlds. Not your rule. Just understanding. And maybe a challenge worth our effort. They spoke of Earth as a world that had faced extinction repeatedly and kept moving forward, a place where survival had never been guaranteed and victory had always demanded sacrifice. They explained that humanity's power didn't come from their machines, but from a mindset shaped by loss. They didn't fear annihilation because they had lived with it since their first spark of civilization. The Empire's envoy, bewildered, asked if humanity intended to rule. The humans shook their head. We don't rule. We adapt. That's something no empire has ever done. The statement lingered like prophecy. Empires seek permanence. Humanity had found strength in impermanence. Their resilience wasn't born from conquest but from endurance. As the transmission spread across the stars, other species listened in secret. For some, humanity's words were a warning, for others, they were liberation. The myth of galactic supremacy shattered as countless civilizations realized that strength didn't come from control. It came from surviving what control could never predict. The humans had changed the definition of power without claiming the throne. In the following years, the Empire withdrew from border expansion, investing in defense and diplomacy. They studied humanity not to defeat them, but to understand how they endured chaos without falling to it. Yet, for all their analysis, they never fully grasped the human paradox, how a species capable of kindness could also wield destruction without hesitation, how laughter could follow bloodshed without cruelty. Humanity was not at war with others, they were at war with complacency itself. The last recorded message from the human fleet before disappearing beyond known space became legend. It was brief, almost poetic. We come in peace, but peace has never lasted. If the galaxy forgets what made it fragile, we'll remind it again. No threats. No promises. Just the acknowledgement that their existence was a mirror held to the universe's vanity. Generations later, when children of alien worlds studied the fall of the Empire's arrogance, they were taught about the day humanity laughed. That single sound became a symbol, the reminder that somewhere beyond the map stars lived a race that did not seek dominion, only purpose. The Empire recovered in time, stronger and wiser, but its citizens never forgot that encounter. In every new treaty, in every council session, one unspoken truth guided their caution: the humans had not vanished, they had simply gone quiet. And everyone knew that when they laughed again, it would not be out of mockery. It would mean the galaxy had grown complacent once more, and the storm that once shattered empires was awake again.